Presented exclusively by Mother's Polish.
Welcome back to another edition of the Slipstream podcast. As always, this is your host, Brady. And thankfully, no one is stuck in a Brazilian roadblock. We have a full crew joining me in the Slipstream tonight with Sten, and Matthew, and Coltrickle Jr. Hopefully you boys are all jacked up on some Halloween candy and ready to go tonight. But unfortunately, there's no race for us to recap this week. So for this week's episode, we're going to do a bit of a Formula One happy hour and just go around the horn and talk about all the top news from the week of Formula One and answer some questions submitted by our listeners. So let's get after it. So Cole, I know you've been the one in the group that's been following this for months. Let's talk Vegas for a second. Did you get tickets?
Dude, so buckle up. No, I didn't get. I've been making reservations. So let's start from the beginning. So I've been calling hotels since they announced that it was coming. And all the hotels have told me, stop calling, we're not taking reservations. So then last week, I booked a reservation for this November and then called the hotel and said it was a mistake and could they just transfer it to next year? And the woman laughed at me and told me no. I tried to get on the pre-sale to get tickets. I waited 30 minutes to get in the queue. My numbers didn't move at all. At the end of the queue, all the $500 general admission tickets were sold out. They only had a handful of the $2,500 tickets still. So no, I didn't get tickets. I found a room that overlooks the strip, which looks beautiful, but it's $6,000 a night. So I don't think we'll be going to Vegas next year, unfortunately, unless we get a sponsor. Shout out.
Yeah, we might need to hit up Ross at Grid Rivals and see if he wants to hook Grid Rivals and us up for the week or the weekend. That'd be pretty great. In a few of us, at least in our past lives, we used to travel all the time. And I know Sten used to be a, Diamond member. So unfortunately, we don't have. You still are a Diamond member?
Still am. Yeah, I was 11 years consecutive, so I'm Diamond for life.
Oh, respect.
Wait,
Wow.
So why haven't we tried that angle?
Yeah, that's true.
I'm not wasting my points. I still got like 2 million points. I'm not wasting those.
It's Vegas.
That would be like one night or 2 nights.
All
That's all we need.
Worth it.
Yeah. 30
It's like
seconds hour
you
Vegas
guys
spender.
each give me $3,000, and I will use some of my points.
See you in Coda.
That's just one roll of the dice. You might be able to win that back while we're there.
True.
So I'm in.
2-yo.
I'm putting all mine on Joe for the win, and we're going home a millionaires.
I don't know. I mean, if you've seen the track layout, here's the thing. I mean, there's a lot to talk about with Vegas. And the reason we're talking about it, for those that don't know, is that this past weekend, there was a lot of kickoff activities with some drivers in town. I think it was Lewis, George, Checo, and even Gunther were in town to kick off activities to kind of launch the official kind of looking forward to Vegas in 2023. But if you've seen the track, I'm pretty sure it feels like it's like 17 miles in a straight line. It's really not, obviously, but the drag down the straight and the strip in Vegas, it's in November next year. The amount of grid penalties I feel like that's going to happen during that weekend leading up to the race is going to be astronomical. And I don't think the Alfa Romeo is going to finish that race. So I might lay my odds somewhere else, Matt.
I think he's coming on strong next year, boys. I'm always down for a Joe bet when it comes to next year.
I like it. The underdog pays well. And as always, gamble responsibly. That's our message to you all. So Cole, tell us a little bit more about the activities. I know that there were some videos and highlights. We had Lewis and George and Checo, driving, older F1 cars. I believe some safety cars. What all they do this past weekend?
Just get to run up and down the strip. It looks like they got to just take it all in. So it looks like I think they each got like 3 runs a couple hours apart. George couldn't get the tires to light up the first time, and I think he got into the barrier. It was good fun. Everybody laughed, but no damage. Lewis came out next, and he hit the barrier, but he hit it because he did so many donuts that he couldn't see straight anymore. It's too much smoke. And then Checo came out and he had one of the old Red Bulls, the V8 Red Bull. So that thing sounded unbelievable, ripping down the strip. But looked like it was good fun for everybody. Lewis said it was going to be the most exciting race of his career, that he couldn't wait to come back. It looks like it's going to be all time. I'm so excited for it. I wish we could be there.
Yeah, and I know in one of the videos, and we just posted this on our Instagram, and Matt, you were excited about this, the sort of underglow lighting on some of the vehicles that they had on track for these festivities. Feels like something that should be mandatory in all night races in Formula One. What do you think?
It's beautiful. I mean, that Mercedes teal underneath Lewis's car going up and down the strip, mandatory every night race from here to eternity. I don't care if it's just white lights underneath, have a design. You can't really make a design, but to have something under there, it's just so cool looking, and it'll just add to it. And
it's Need for Speed Underground, like 100%.
And then I just love, like, since it's on, it's on the underfloor, like you get damage on the underfloor, so like now like half your lights are like broken, so then you can tell if that somebody's got damage underneath because one side's working, the other side's not. Like it tell you even more about the cars too. It could.
Yeah, I saw some commentary on that I actually thought was interesting, and I'm curious, sort of the difference of opinions here between sort of the modern day Formula One and sort of the historical fan of Formula One. There were some people, and I think some of this might happen to some degree in like Formula E and others, where for a night race, like the lights could change colors, right? Could you imagine if the light goes green when they're in DRS? So you kind of know that's another visual indicator for the fan that this guy is using DRS, or an even different color if they're harvesting their battery or using the overtake button, things like that, to kind of give us, the fan, a visual cue of what's happening with the car. I personally think it'd be kind of cool. I understand if you're a traditionalist and don't want that, but I think for the night races, that'd be so cool to see.
I agree. I think that would be incredible. I also think that next season we will see a couple cars run like the Tron looking wheels with the LED wheels. We've seen some demos of that before. So if we could get the LED understrips and wheels, oh my goodness. Every night race is mandatory.
There's nothing better than Tron. Daft Punk did the whole album, like, video game, movie. It's got to be one of the greatest movies of all time, right?
Top 50.
I'm gonna admit I've never seen it.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, Matt.
That's fine.
Right
I'm not
here.
gonna be the person to shame you for not watching a movie that's amazing, but it's pretty good. You should check it out.
We'll have to add that to our, holiday vacation streaming list coming up, Matt, in the next couple of weeks, and maybe we can do a review here on the podcast. But yeah, a lot of exciting activities. I know for us here in the United States, I think Vegas obviously is a pretty awesome town. If you've never been, you should definitely go. You might not remember what happens, or at least may not remember and live to tell about it. We've got some great stories. I know this group does from my bachelor party, and finding people who we had to track someone down based on his Twitter feed and found him on a bench the next morning. So shout out to you, Rob. Miss you, buddy. But lots of good times. I'm sure the who's who of the world will be there. I think a lot of the people who are buying up these suites and these tickets are literally, the mega million and billionaires from all over the world, which makes it pretty difficult for people like us to afford tickets, or at least get access to tickets. One thing I did see on one of the Facebook Formula One groups that I'm a part of that I thought was fascinating, somebody chimed in and said that he's going to Abu Dhabi in 2 weeks, and his entire Abu Dhabi trip from the United States to Abu Dhabi and back is cheaper than going to Vegas for the race.
I believe it.
Something's wrong with that picture. Good for him. I'm glad he's doing it, but that may be something for us to try in the future. But he's here in the United States. It's an easy domestic flight from wherever he is. Some of us are here in Atlanta. Atlanta to Vegas is a pretty regular flight. But it's more affordable to go all the way to the Middle East and back.
When you think it's $4,000 a night, like if you're there for the whole weekend, the Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you're spending, for the four of us to go, for flights, hotel, tickets, we would spend $28,000 collectively.
For sure.
Like, we could go to Disney as my entire family twice for my portion of the $7,000 for a week.
It'll be a hot ticket. I mean, the rumor. There's also another rumor that the Brad Pitt movie, that there's gonna be some big scene filmed at the Vegas track. I think the finale of the movie is going to be filmed there, so the who's who will definitely be in the crowd.
Well, I'll tell you this right now. As us recording this podcast tonight, I think the Powerball in the United States is like 1.9 billion. So if one of us wins that, the entire race in Vegas will be named the Slipstream Vegas race or something like that. And we'll get all of our original listeners to join us in Vegas for that race. So fingers crossed, pick some good numbers. But anyways, it's exciting. I think obviously Vegas, outside of New York, is probably the coolest place you could have a race. Especially at nighttime down the strip will be awesome to see. So exciting to have some Formula One, folks like Lewis and George and Checo and Gunther in town to kick off those activities. And we'll see if we can make our way there next year. But moving on, and Austin, I know you'll appreciate part of this. Something that we posted also on Instagram recently is just sort of a curiosity question that I've had over the last week, coming outside of the last race where Max broke some records. Is Max Verstappen's 2022 season the greatest season in F1 history?
I think if you look at the first 8 races and you look at how it finished, there was the middle and end stint that was unbelievable. I don't know. I mean, statistically, maybe. I think it's all subjective, but I don't think that by race 4 we were thinking he was going to win the championship, let alone win it with 4 races left.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how to put this in exact historical context. So just to run through some of the stats that he's achieved this year, some of the accomplishments. He's obviously world champion. He's won 14 times this season, which is the most ever. He has 16 podiums and an average finish of 2.74. He scored 416 points, which is the most ever. He has the largest gap ever to second place, which is currently at 136 points. 70% win percentage. And oh, by the way, there's still 2 races left.
He'll win at least one of those 2 races. Absolutely. And the answer is probably yes. But I would say if he wins one of the 2 or both, the answer is, it is. With all those stats, how do you argue that it's not?
I'll give one rebuttal to it. And it's mainly the points scored. It's the most points scored ever. A lot of that has to do with the amount of races and the change in the point scoring and all that. Since 1988, he'd have the 13th highest point percentage in a season. So he'd be 13th in that. So even though he has the most points ever, the percentage he holds is about 76%. It'd be 13th since 1988. Just to give some context, Lewis has done it had 4 seasons higher than that. Vettel has had 2 seasons higher than that. Schumacher is up there 1, 2, 3 times higher than that. That would be, I think, the only rebuttal that you say is that even though he won a lot of races and some of the issues did have to do with the car earlier on in the season, the actual amount of points isn't as much as some of these other seasons.
You're talking about like total percentage points available in the season?
Correct. Yes. Points scored per points available. Points, yeah.
So he can still increase his percentage with the last 2 races, though.
Correct. He could get up there
because he has 14 wins. I'm going off memory here. I might be wrong. He has a second place in Austria to Leclerc. He has a third place in Monaco. He has 2 sevenths, one in Singapore and one in
Wasn't it
uh,
not Hungary? He won Hungary.
Silverstone,
Yeah, Silverstone.
and he has 2 DNFs.
So
So
he
he's
could.
finished. Yeah, I mean he's finished twice off the podium when finishing the race, but there was damage. Or, I mean, Singapore, they didn't have their shit together.
He could get up to highest would be 78.5 points. He's currently at 76.5. 78.5 would tie Lewis's second highest, which would have been the 2020 season. Lewis's highest was 2015. He had over 80% available points scored to his available.
Got it.
Crazy.
So not available points for anyone in this, not available total points of everyone who's scoring points but if you won every single race, he's only getting 80% of the threshold of getting the maximum every week. Got it.
20, yeah. And Crazy Vettel has the highest of kind of your active or really new. In 2013, he had 84%. He scored 84% of the amount of points he could have, which is a pretty incredible number.
Yeah.
Yeah, which kind of leads me to a different question. So Cole is our resident Seb fan. Think he's having second thoughts right now about retirement?
I don't think there's second thoughts about retirement. He did say that he wouldn't rule out a comeback. He did say that a couple days ago, but he's retired. He looks great. I mean, honestly, the second half of the season, Aston Martin's come alive, and Seb looks almost back to his racing form, and which is great to see. Almost everyone loves Seb. So no, I think he's retired. I think he stays retired. I think maybe it was he and Valtteri are running they're running a race in Iceland maybe this season. Anyway, yes, hope to see Seb around, but I don't think he'll be on the grid again. I think he's done.
Yeah, I mean, I think like a lot of athletes, they're sort of leaving the door open. You know, if something were to happen, I know when the drivers were in Japan, he was all for, if there's an opportunity for me to drive Suzuka again, he would absolutely do it. So maybe these last two races aren't the last time we see Seb on a Formula One track. Yeah, I mean, hopefully for him, he's not having too many second thoughts. You want to be firm in that decision and know that you've made the right decision at the right time, which I'm sure is hard for people of his caliber and with all the success he's had.
Let's just get a Seb and Danny Rick team in 2024, and Brady will start buying merch for him. His two favorite drivers.
Yeah, I'd have to think of a good name. Like Washed Wankers or something. I don't know. Hopefully that's not offensive. I apologize.
Jesus, I hope you wash it.
But yeah, I mean, speaking of, success, and Cole, another one for you. There was some conversation, and this isn't meant to hopefully not meant to bash Checo, but he's come out more recently and said he hopes next season he'll be able to fight with Max more. Do we think that's really possible for Checo?
No. Helmut Marko came out and said that it's a curse to be Max Verstappen's teammate because you're not going to beat him. It doesn't matter how good you are on how good of a day you're driving. You're lap in, lap out. You're not going to beat Max Verstappen. So it's got to be really difficult to be his teammate. I know we'll probably talk about it in a little bit, but there are other drivers who have had opportunities to be teammates who may not want that opportunity because, Danny Rick left being his teammate. It's got to be tough to follow someone who's that consistent and obviously as dominant as he is.
Yeah, I did see something recently where, Christian talked a little bit about Danny Rick's decision to leave Red Bull for Renault. And he talked a lot about how, being Max's teammate in the trajectory that Max was on, Danny Rick kind of saw the writing on the wall. Now, I think Christian wanted to keep Danny Rick, but, egos get in the way a little bit. When you know that there's a younger guy who's better than you, sometimes you look for the other opportunity to be that alpha dog, and unfortunately, it doesn't seem like it's worked for Danny Rick, given where he's at right now. But yeah, I imagine it's got to be difficult to be Max's teammate on the track.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to kind of have a mindset there to how you're going to perform and know that you're the number two different team. But I believe it was this week Toto or last week Toto gave props to Valtteri for how well he kind of handled being Lewis's teammate, and just how he was a kind of a perfect teammate for Lewis. So, yeah, I mean, I think you've got to have the right mindset. You've got to be the right driver, and for some it just doesn't work out. Some just can't do it, right? And not that Checo can't do it; he's just not going to compete.
Well, that's
Speaking of
one thing.
consistency, sorry, Brady. Speaking of consistency, did you guys see? I think Max and Latifi's data after Mexico. Max on his
He
medium
was in
tires.
the 122s every single lap except one,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, he was in like consistently. He was in his targeted lap time every single time. I think Latifi, I want to say he was running like 23s, but his stint of like whatever the last 50 laps on his hards, like Latifi was nailing 23s lap after lap. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, I mean, so we'll see. Checo's a great driver, super consistent. He's been a great teammate. And maybe this is something we can spend more time on in a sort of an off-season episode. I think that's what makes Formula One unique, is that you do have that teammate where it's kind of like a frenemy in a way, where there's that internal competitive rivalry. But at the end of the day, for Red Bull, they're going to give preference to Max. For now, at least, Mercedes is going to give preference to Lewis, and maybe that changes over the next couple of years. But there's always sort of that A driver and that B driver to some degree. And now maybe some teams let him fight it out more often than others. But it's just an interesting dynamic that, in a way, Checo can't really control unless he's beating Max. But he's also not set up for that because of the team dynamic. So it's just definitely a unique thing that happens in Formula One that probably doesn't happen in a lot of other sports.
Hopefully,
Sticking-
when Checo, when his contract ends next season, hopefully he can still continue on in Formula One, because he has been competitive. He has got some wins under his belt. So I don't know what seats are available, but he probably won't keep that Red Bull seat. So hopefully he does find something when his time is done there.
I don't know. Do you think that you would rather leave a team where you could secure second driver champion, like second in the standings, as opposed to being the number one driver on like Alfa Romeo, for example, like what Valtteri did from last year to this year? Like, do you think they'd want to do that?
So if I'm Checo, I absolutely want to stay with Red Bull. I think, Cole, where maybe you're going, and we had a bullet to talk about this a little bit later, but you've got to look at the available talent also. So, for example, and there was a lot of conversations about that this week. What if Lando's available? Or what if Charles is available? If you're Christian Horner, would you rather have a Lando or a Charles to be teammates with Max, or do you stick with Checo? So maybe that's sort of the variable that Cole, you're sort of hinting at.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Red Bull on their end that they. I mean, he's been a great team player. Obviously, he pretty much won Max's first championship and helped win the constructors with his own wins in the second of Max's. So I don't think Checo wants to leave. Why would you want to leave Red Bull unless you're Danny Ricciardo? But I don't think that Red Bull will keep him around. He's not super young, and I think that they will also be looking for who's the next talent, and they have a whole Red Bull driving program that Checo did not go through. So I don't think they're going to want to tie up a seat for someone who hasn't spent that whole process in their system. Give someone else a chance to come up and get that seat.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, because they this past race, they said there's like 7 or 8 current drivers that went through the Red Bull program just already in F1. So whoever they've got is still in the wings that's coming up. But I mean, if you think about it now, just F1 drivers, not future talent. they'd probably take 5 or 6 other drivers over Checo right now. If it was a free reign, they could have whoever they wanted next season. There's 5 or 6 guys they would at least that they would name before you get to him, in my opinion.
Yes, I agree with you as well. But I would also say of those, here's a good question. Of those 5 guys that you can think of, when that radio call comes in at Abu Dhabi with however many laps that you need to hold up Lewis Hamilton, how many of those guys bite and do it for the team? I don't know, because I think some of those guys might be too competitive. So Checo has been master team player. So yeah, I can't wait to see what they do with it. But they have so many other excellent drivers to give that seat a chance, and they may regret not letting Pierre get another shot at it. But hopefully Checo can find a seat, but I don't think it'll be with Red Bull.
Yeah, we also don't know what we don't know, right? I mean, if Checo finishes P2 in the championship this year, and then Red Bull goes on to win next year and the year after, and Checo is P2 again, I'm not saying he will, but Red Bull's going to have a hard time, getting rid of that, right? But on those rumors, and they weren't really rumors. I mean, I think Christian and maybe even Lando himself came out and said that yes, they had conversations within the last year or two before Lando signed his extension with McLaren. My question, if you're Lando's, why McLaren and not Red Bull? Is this back to the whole Max teammate thing, or is he just hopeful that McLaren, gets it right in the next couple of years and he can lead them to their first championship in some time? Like, why do you not take that Red Bull call a little bit more seriously and ultimately sign with them if you're Lando?
I would say the number one driver you don't turn down the opportunity to be the number one driver on a top half constructor. I think that is better for your career in the long run than being the inevitable and easy number 2 driver at somewhere else. If you're trying to get to the top of the sport.
Well, okay. Related to this conversation, who would you rather have right now, Checo or Lando?
Lando.
Could Lando compete with Max in the same car?
With time, yes. Not in one season. Give him a few seasons, but I would say yes.
But he's
may
also
not beat him a lot.
Yeah. He's not getting that preferential treatment that he is at McLaren right now.
Yeah, I understand where Lando's coming from. I think he said in an interview a long time ago that I think McLaren was his favorite team growing up, and I think they're from down the road from where he's from. I think he's just been always a fan, and they showed him things that were very promising for the next few years. Like, he obviously didn't sign thinking he would be able to win a championship in 21, 22. But I think their plan with Lando was by 23, 24, they're fighting for wins. And by the end of this 24, 25, they are going for a championship. So if Lando is not winning races, his contract, I think, goes until 25. If he's not winning races by 24, he would probably start entertaining the idea of going to Red Bull, even if it's with Max as a teammate, because they're competing. And if McLaren's not competing for wins, you're never going to get a championship. And that's, no matter how much you want to play the team game, you want a driver's championship. That's all you care about. So, yeah, I'd take Lando all day over Checo.
If you look at like just historical, like look at Michael Schumacher, right? He won in Benetton, and then he left there, the championship team, and said, "I want to make Ferrari great again." And he went there, and Ferrari was not a champion team for 4 years. And then he went on his streak, and he, was the greatest of the era and potentially all time. But if you look at the regulations, how they're written, like, eventually the teams will start like right sizing or changing positions based on just how everything is being conducted throughout the league. The less time you have, the more important it is to get every small fine detail right. Williams and Haas have a lot more time to make those mistakes and right size them in a season. And I don't think that we're going to see it this year. We didn't, or next year, but I really do think that like a domino is going to fall on one of these midfield teams in the near future that is going to make them all of a sudden the number one contender. And I think that Lando might recognize that with McLaren, because if you look at like the very beginning in like preseason testing in Bahrain, they were possibly the absolute worst team because the brake issue and everything else, they just couldn't make the right decision. They right sized it this year, but like, what if he happened to stay for another 2 years and they have that extra 15% relative time to those top three constructor teams, and they all of a sudden start winning championships as that team? Like, that's way more impressive than someone who came into a team who was already on the top and maintained that. Max kind of came into a team that was close to the top. Lewis came onto a team that was kind of always fighting for championships. So like, it would be really cool to see a driver grow into that role like Schumacher did with Ferrari.
Yeah, I mean, I think if the end game for Lando is a championship with McLaren, or at least battling for a championship with McLaren, that would be amazing. I guess just for me, I would find it, and maybe this is more common than we think. I mean, you look at George being in a Williams for 3 years, is that, you know, if you have that opportunity in front of you to be in one of the or the best car, and you have the patience to say thanks but no thanks, at least not yet, I mean, good for him, and hopefully it works out. It's just, you know, given where we are, at least in the 2022 season, I would love to see Lando in that car next to Max. I mean, he seems to get more out of that McLaren than he should. So, and look, maybe that happens in the future. I mean, Lando's clearly phenomenally talented and one of the most popular drivers in Formula One already. So, I think we would all love to see him fighting for podiums and fighting for wins every single weekend. And hopefully he does that with McLaren. But always fun to see them sort of open up about, you know, some of the rumors and sort of moving them from rumors to real news, where yes, they had conversations and ultimately it didn't work out, and you know, we'll see what's in store for Lando's future. Sticking with Red Bull and Max for one more moment, we do have a question from one of our Instagram followers. The question's really around the Max Verstappen drama and can we explain it? And so, you know, I had asked a follow-up question just to clarify, you know, why does there seem to be some drama that follows Max? To me, Max is just a race car driver. I don't think if he had the option, he wouldn't do media. He wouldn't do anything else except be in that car. Is that why drama follows him? Is it just being connected to Abu Dhabi and the Red Bull stuff? Is the drama sort of, you know, faked a little bit through the Netflix series and, you know, media or what have you? How do we explain that?
I think a lot of it is what you said. He's just a race car driver. That, and he plays FIFA a lot, apparently. They just say that he opens up FIFA packs in the paddock, just waiting to go out there and drive. So I think that's part of it. He's kind of like Marshawn Lynch. You know, I mean, he's just here so he doesn't get fined. Like, he wouldn't do media if he didn't have to do media. It's just, I don't want to say the word soft because that's such a negative tone, but he gets very irritated when things aren't kind of kid gloves on him when it comes to the media. Lewis has taken a lot of his shots over the last several years, some warranted, some not, some bigoted, some not, and he doesn't really push back as hard as Max does. I don't fault him. If he has the right, he has the power to say, I don't want to talk with you, and he doesn't want to talk with you, and he doesn't have to, so be it. But I think it also opens up the door for people to be like, be a little tougher, put a little bit more armor on when it comes to some of this kind of stuff. But if he can block it out that way, then so be it.
I agree. I think he's kind of just a machine. He's kind of wired that way that he's a race car driver and that's all he cares about. And he doesn't care what you think and doesn't care what I think. I mean, he told the reporter that he was going to headbutt him if he asked him another question about the spin. So yeah, he's aggressive, but I understand his not wanting to take part in the Drive to Survive series and not wanting to answer questions with Ted because sometimes you just don't want to hear it. I mean, you got to deal with it enough with all the other media obligations that you have, and with Drive to Survive, I think his explanation is that it's not like they're using the exact clips of how it's happening. They're using B-roll, and they can kind of spin it how they want to spin it and make him look like when you had that little altercation with Esteban. They got in a little shoving match at the end of the race, and yeah. So I think I understand him not wanting to take part in some of the series because he can't control what they're going to make him look like, and they normally make him look pretty bad.
F1 has to hate that, though, right?
Yes,
They have to hate that. The best driver, arguably the most famous driver outside of Lewis, doesn't want to participate in really one of the main reasons F1 has gained popularity over the last 3 to 4 years. He wants nothing to do with it. That's got to irk them about as much as anything.
I do find it interesting if you look across sort of the landscape of sports and you try to make parallels. At least that's what I try to do. I mean, you look at people like Bill Belichick and Nick Saban and even Tiger Woods. I mean, Tiger Woods, the greatest golfer of all time, and hated interacting with the media and just wouldn't really give you answers because all he wanted to do was go beat the shit out of people on the golf course. And I get that same feeling for Max, where all he wants to do is be the fastest driver on the planet. And so all this other stuff, especially when it's spun to be like nonsense, at least in his brain, he just doesn't want to touch it. He's like, this is stupid. Just get me in the car and I'll just show you that I'm better than everyone. That part I do appreciate, but I also understand, the irony for me personally is here is I was a huge Tiger Woods fan because I appreciate what he did on the golf course. But I also feel sort of like, well, we want to see a little bit more personality from Max. But at the end of the day, he's a race car driver. And right now, he's the best in the world.
I do think he has a better personality than he puts forward. Some of like the behind the scenes stuff, some of the stuff when they're in that like podium room and he's interacting with other drivers, he seems to be a funny person, and like at least when he interacts and cameras are there, so it's not like completely, behind closed doors. I think there's more there. There's more positive to it. It's just the media that gets pushed out on whatever because it's through a news whatever site on Twitter or Facebook or the TV is him just being like, I don't want anything to do with this.
Nobody who knows Max Verstappen personally says anything bad about him. Like everyone who's close to him says like he's a great guy, he's super nice, he's real like he's just he just doesn't want to he doesn't want to deal with the media. So yeah, everything you see him like when he's on Twitch or when he's streaming, like he seems like a funny guy or a nice guy, but yeah, he does not put it on for the cameras. F1 would love to have a Lando or a George or a Charles win the championship because they would love to be the poster boy of F1, where Max, just give him the title and leave him alone. He'll take it again next year too.
So Stan, I know you've been awfully quiet on this subject.
He's been smirking for about 30 seconds.
As our Max fan, I'm sure you're texting him right now, but
I've just been listening. I think it is. Christian's said it a handful of times too. Like Max just wants to drive. I again, like I could play that there's a English, Great Britain bias that like Max was kind of the villain to Lewis being the hero for a little bit, maybe a year or two. And I rewind and I think of like Dale Earnhardt and Jeff Gordon. Like you had like villain and hero in 90s NASCAR. But I think that, even listening to Crofty, like introduce George and Lewis on stage in Vegas. He's like, Lewis Hamilton, the greatest of all time, like undisputed, never challenged. Like, there is that bias, and unfortunately, when you have a media conglomerate that is based out of the country that has had the reigning champion for so long, anything that fills that shadow or fills those shoes isn't going to be what you're wanting. So I think that Max is just a person. I know that I'm 36, and I've even said probably in my late 20s things about wanting to headbutt a reporter or something, because I just didn't want to deal with something. Like, you guys, if you haven't heard any of us tee off yet, listen to our Twitch, races on Wednesday nights. But like,
There's a great pilot gas station story on last week's episode.
yeah, but he started racing in Formula One when he was 17. I know I made terrible decisions when I was 17, but I didn't have the whole world looking at me. And Brady, I think your point about Tiger is that I remember watching Tiger when we were in what, sixth grade, right? Like late 90s. Tiger didn't have all the social media, the instant access, the being on 24/7. Some people can do it really well. Lewis does a great job and has been media trained and groomed for a decade. He does a wonderful job. Max doesn't care to.
Yeah, I mean, I think the craziest part of all this, and I think, Austin, that's a phenomenal explanation. I agree with everything you said. I think some of it is also, at least manufactured, feels like too much of an aggressive word here, because it kind of comes with a connotation, but some of it is manufactured, because at the end of the day, you just look at what WWE does, right? They tell a story, and stories have heroes and villains, like you said, Austin, and people get to pick a side. Now that increases sort of your rooting interest when you're watching a race. So maybe some of that is, to some degree, manufactured and not maybe exactly warranted in Max's case. Especially going into, if you just, like we always at least hint at every episode, if you look back at Abu Dhabi, I mean, I posted on our TikTok. I mean, the emotions are still so raw from Abu Dhabi a year later, which in a way is really good for Formula One, because people there will be people who say, I haven't watched Formula One since that happened. And, the Max fans just tell that guy that he's an idiot. But, some of that is good, right? I mean, you want people talking, you want people invested, you want people interested. You don't want anybody being, disrespectful or what have you. But yeah, I mean, having a hero, having a villain is definitely good storytelling when it comes to sports. And that certainly is a part of it. So yeah, I mean, I think Max is a race car driver, and right now, like I said earlier, he's the best in the world, and that's what he wants to do. He's going to do that as much as he can, and cut out as much of the other nonsense when he can. So,
and like, if you look at this year's interviews, again, like, I'm going to have bias, which I'll admit, that's fine. But like, he is way more polished, put together, less uptight, more easygoing. And it's not just because he thought that he was going to win the championship since France. Like, he's just calmer. Like, and a lot of the former champion, commentators have said that, like, now that he's won his first championship, like, you can kind of peel back the skin and see who he really is. And this year, I mean, Cole, you said it earlier, he's kind of a Terminator. Like, he did unbelievable things this year because he didn't have the pressure of trying to win his first championship. So it's now really interesting to see how he continues to evolve, and if he keeps this opportunity with Red Bull and any of the penalties or whatever that will come in the coming years, like, will he be able to keep up this form or will he not? I think that he'll do pretty well, but only time will tell.
yeah, so I think it's Beavis 6780 who sent in that question. A lot of opinions on that, but I think, you heard what we said. I think some of it maybe is manufactured, a lot less of it's warranted, and Max is Max, and he's going to continue doing that and being himself and winning races, a lot of races, and we'll see what happens. And we're rolling. There's a comment before our next question. And Matt, curious of your thoughts. There was some commentary, I think it was from Toto over the last few days, that basically he said he'd rather win a race in the last two races of the season than finish second in the constructors. What would you rather do?
Yeah, I mean, I think especially with the implications and what teams get or don't get in their position in the constructors, it makes sense. Mercedes is already saving $300 million because of the cost cap this year. So them getting third and losing out on 10 million, 20 million bucks isn't that big of a deal, where getting that extra wind tunnel time and that car development time being in third, I think is a big deal for them, much more than the money. And I think if Mercedes can get a win in one of these last two races, which Lewis does well in Brazil, Mercedes really until Max kind of took over the last couple of years did well in Abu. So they have a shot potentially. I think it at least gives them a good ending to the season and shows that they have gotten the car back to a place where it can compete for wins. Whereas if they just get second, what does second matter if you're not actually winning races, which they could still possibly get that, which would be weird, but I mean, they could.
Yeah, I think for me, if I'm Toto, I definitely want Lewis to get a win to continue his streak. We talked about that a little bit last episode. Pretty historic, going back to 2007 and winning a race in every season. I personally would like to see it. Just, I mentioned this again on last week's episode, is I just appreciate that kind of history of sport. So I would love to see it. I think there's another stat about Seb, how he's had at least a podium in every season since like 2008. Part of me would love to see that also, right? I mean, I would love to see history continue and records like that continue to move on. So we'll see. And that sort of dovetails into our next question from Abby. She wants to know, can Lewis win his 8th championship in 2023? Dan, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think so. I think Mercedes has kind of narrowed the gap a little bit. They're going to have a little bit more advantage coming into next year over Red Bull. Ferrari might still do Ferrari things. I think it would be smart of Mercedes to not get second in the constructors, just to have that little edge over Ferrari. But it's possible. We'll see kind of how the cars turn out in Bahrain next year.
Cole, what do you think?
I think it's possible. Yeah, I think it's possible. I think there's still so much in the air. I think it'll be really exciting to see testing to see the speed differences with Red Bull's time that they've lost. I think they're going to be at 60%, I think, but it's all said and done, of how much time they're going to get in the wind tunnel. So I think that Mercedes can. I think it would be awesome for George to give him a run, but sure, I think Lewis could win another title. It sounds like he may sign a long deal to do it, so he'll have a lot of opportunity.
It's possible if you're Mercedes and Lewis. I mean, I guess there's always a chance. What percentage of that? You're not Max, and Max is, I think, we can agree, has probably been the best driver. He's obviously been the best driver this year and the best driver last year. They're going to get more wind tunnel time. It'll be interesting to see how much the Red Bull penalty affects them going into next year. That could be their that could be what kind of gives Mercedes the edge.
Yeah, I think I'm willing to take it a little bit of a step further, and I'm just going to go ahead with a hot take. I think Lewis will win his 8th championship next year. I think that the momentum that they're building at the end of the season, and obviously we'll see pretty early on next year if this is true. They claim they figured out the problem and what went wrong with the W13 this season. So if that's true, given Mercedes funding and obviously 8 championships in a row until this year, Lewis sort of remotivated to be back up front. And the impact to the penalties of Red Bull, I think Lewis will win his 8th championship next year. Mark it down. But we'll see. So, to wrap up tonight, there's a few other things that we can just kind of touch on these quickly. Obviously, and sadly, we're coming up on the last 2 weekends of the Formula One season, believe it or not. The good news is we only have to wait a few months in the offseason to get back on the track. But with the end of the 2022 season, that means the end of a few things like Yuki and Pierre's bromance coming to an end. So, Cole, how do we think Pierre and Ocon are going to get along?
We've talked about it before on a podcast a while ago as we were predicting that this was going to happen, and it did happen. Thank goodness for Pierre. It sounds like they were old mates back in the day, and time passed, and it sounds like they've buried the hatchet. They know they got to be teammates, and they'll make it work. So 2 Frenchmen driving for a French constructor. It's a dream situation. They're both, I would say, at the peak of their career. It's the right time. Alpine seems to be coming on strong. I think they make it work. I mean, I hate it because I've kind of enjoyed watching Pierre and Yuki make the little videos, and they seem like they're a good time. But Yuki and Nick DeVries, they'll figure it out, and we're all very, very excited for Pierre at Alpine. Everybody is.
Yeah, they've seemed to have buried the hatchet, if you will, given whatever disagreements in the past. I know Pierre and Esteban come from the same hometown, which is pretty cool, and they'll be both driving for a French constructor next year, which is also pretty cool. Also coming to an end is Latifi's career, at least for now, as a Formula One driver. There's lots of rumors about Latifi to IndyCar. Haven't listened to it yet, but he also was recently on the Beyond the Grid podcast, sort of talking about his last couple of years in Formula One and sort of the what went wrong. And, one of the things that I did see sort of in a snippet was that he said that he likes the car in a very specific window, where I think his window of likability, or whatever you want to use to describe it, is much smaller than, say, Alex. It was much harder to get the Williams in that spot. And when it was, and Stin, to your stat earlier, maybe in Mexico, he was in that window where he was just hammering out those solid laps. But unfortunately, his time is up, and if he moves on to IndyCar, hope he does well.
I mean, just because he hammered out consistent laps doesn't mean that they weren't still like 8/10 off of everyone else. But good for Latifi for being consistently bad.
I wasn't trying to kick a man on his way out, but yeah, might as well. Speaking of kicking people while they're down, I know, Cole, I believe you brought this to our attention, but your boy Nikita Mazepin is continuing to spin, but in another way. What's he doing?
He keeps the streak alive. He more spins than F1, more F1 spins than F1 starts. He's still spinning. This time he's a DJ out in Moscow. No one really cares. He's the worst. Nikita Mazepin, go fuck yourself. No one likes you.
Yeah, do we think he ever makes his way back to Formula One?
No.
Yeah, that was
No, if we never see or hear from that idiot again, that would be the best. But the fact that he was in Moscow DJing somewhere, I feel like it says a lot about what's happening over there. That he's out at a party, freaking DJing it up, and there's a lot going on. So yeah, go fuck yourself, Nikita.
Do we know his DJ name?
Mr. Spins a Lot?
Has to be. I mean, it's something
like that. Made to spin.
I don't know.
I wonder if his dad paid that club to have him there too.
Yeah, 1,000%.
I just want to know what song do you think he was playing?
Du Hast.
I was gonna go with "You Spin My Head." I don't know, something like that. It's the spin thing.
No, he was playing Rammstein Du Hast for sure.
I hate that he's in the news at all because he doesn't deserve it, and thank God he's out. And hopefully Haas has some exciting news coming in the coming days.
Yeah, so that's sort of the last rumor to touch on, and we may have, at least that's the rumor, we may have resolution to this by the time you hear from us next. Is that it does seem like Haas is going to sign Nico Hulkenberg, at least for next season. There's been articles out the last couple of days where Kevin Magnussen has even said he's open to the idea of teaming with Nico. So, it seems to be trending in that direction. Whether or not we get final resolution, I believe there's rumors even on Thursday. We'll see. I'm a Nico fan. I don't really know why. I think just because I appreciate his ability to come in sort of last minute for Racing Point and Aston Martin the last couple of years and be successful. I know he's pretty quick when he's had a chance. Maybe he's a little bit more talented right now than Mick is. I don't really understand the long-term play here from Haas. With Haas's new sponsorship from MoneyGram, they will actually be able to spend up to the cap next year, which I think is the first time, I don't know, ever. So look, if you're looking for speed and talent to maximize that revenue, I mean, maybe Nico's the right play here. So yeah, I mean, like I said, we don't know for sure, but that seems to be the direction. And if so, welcome back, Nico.
Should be fun if those two, they've banged around a few times, and K-Mag said that obviously he would have no issues if they were teammates. So could be a lot of fun. I don't understand it from the point of, if I'm trying to build a team, especially here in America, Nico Hulkenberg's probably not the guy that I'm going to put in the car. But to score points potentially and to move up in the constructors for a season or maybe a couple, sure. Yeah, give him a whirl. Why not?
He seems to be more beloved than successful. So it almost seems like the love for him outweighs what he has contributed at times. Doesn't make any sense why you're putting a 35-year-old driver in the car if you're trying to build something long term, but maybe they're not. Maybe they've got a plan for 2 years down the road to try to. These are just a couple reset years, but it'll be fun. I like him.
Yeah, I mean, if he's back in Formula One next season, he will immediately have the best hair on the track, so he'll have that going for him for sure.
He will also continue the longest streak for never being on a podium. Longest streak, never being on a podium. Nico Hulkenberg. Keep the streak alive, Nico.
I did see a video going around a little bit before this podcast. Is his rookie season, he actually got pole in Brazil. So I don't know if that means anything, but we got Brazil coming back this week. They might announce Nico in Brazil. It could just be some good karma for him. But anyways, that wraps up this week's episode of the Slipstream podcast. As always, we appreciate you tuning in. And we hope that this podcast continues to move upward, like Formula One's revenue continues to move upward, as reported over the last couple of days. Tens of millions of dollars coming to all of the teams within Formula One for a great quarter. So Formula One is having success. And we appreciate all of you tuning in as always. As always, we'll be back with our recap of the Brazil Grand Prix in a few days. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.